to represent the majority of San Luis Obispo County in the State Assembly since 1947. She's also the first Democrat from San Luis Obispo County to serve in the State Assembly since 1922, and the first Democratic woman ever to hold this seat. And we're going to have Assemblywoman Addis go first because she's really got a tight schedule, and then we'll hear from Senator Laird and Assemblyperson Pellerin. So let me turn it over. Oh, so sorry. I'm Peggy Flynn, president of the DWC, along with my other president, Angela Chestnut. I'm going to hand it over to Angela right now.
Thank you, Peggy. Welcome, Assembly Member Addis. Thank you for being with us this evening at the DWC and with some of your constituents who are here online as well as here in person at the Santa Cruz Police Department Community Room. Would you mind telling us what is going on at the Capitol in Sacramento and what legislative bills you've introduced that have been impactful on behalf of your constituents in the 30th District?
Well, good evening. I want to make sure you can hear me okay. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I'm zooming from my car. And so thank you so much for your consideration of my time, and want to say thank you to the Democratic Women of Santa Cruz leadership for putting this together, to Peggy and Angela and Mike Rotkin for all that you do, as well as all of the constituency. And as I was listening to the bio that you were reading, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to all the folks that helped elect the first Democratic woman ever to this seat. And it wouldn't happen without organizations like the Democratic Women of Santa Cruz County. And so just want to really deeply say thank you to you. And as you mentioned, I'm the first Dem woman, but also the 176th woman ever. And Assemblymember Pellerin is in that cohort with me. They tell us by last name and year and when we got sworn in what number of women in the legislature we are. And so the California State Legislature has been around since 1849, and there's been almost 5,000 people in office. And I'm just the 176th woman. So clearly there is work to do. And big picture, when you ask what is happening, of course, we're in the thick of what's going on with the California state budget and policy that has moved from the Assembly to the Senate, from the Senate to the Assembly. But I thought I would tell you a little bit about the work that I've done as an educator and as a woman in the legislature. And I was a teacher for over 20 years before getting elected. And so almost right up until the day that I was sworn in. And so a lot of my focus has been on how we can create safe spaces in our schools, in our classrooms, and in society in general. And therefore, quite a bit of my work has focused on sexual harassment and sexual assault and what we need to do differently legislatively. So last year, we worked on lifting the statute of limitations on child sex assault in civil court. We were able to successfully do that. The reason that is important is twofold. One, many survivors of child sex assault do not come forward until their mid-50s or later. And two, the only way that we can really stop people who are committing these crimes is to be able to prosecute at any time. And so last year, successful in that. This year, I'm on the education committee as well as the higher ed committee last year, and we have been working on what's called Title IX reform. And what that is a whole package of bills meant to address Title IX issues that you may have heard about at some of our institutions of higher learning. And so I have a package of bills that is addressing issues. One of them is on retreat rights, which would mean that if somebody has a substantiated claim of sexual harassment and they work in higher education in the upper echelons of higher education, they wouldn't be able to get a positive letter of recommendation or retreat back to the classroom after those situations. We're also working at the K-12 level on work permit training for young people going into the workforce, as well as mandated reporter training. So we're trying to hit this issue on both ends. And then working with the first partner who has been publicly an advocate for survivors. And she herself is a survivor of Harvey Weinstein, and this has been talked about publicly. And so she put together a survivors working group at the state capitol that I'm part of to work on that issue. So it's near and dear to me, but also critically important as we think about education and making sure that all children are safe in our education system. Another thing that we have done that I want to thank Assemblymember Pellerin and State Senator Laird, because they are inaugural members of the Central Coast Legislative Caucus. And so we have a caucus of 10 members that represent the Central Coast. So from Santa Cruz, Monterey, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. And together are uplifting issues of the Central Coast. We had our first policy forum a couple weeks ago and featured the Monterey Bay Aquarium, as well as scientists from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, or MBARI. And really, they knocked the socks off people with their in-depth knowledge and understanding of what we can do to serve the Central Coast and the kind of policy that we can uplift across the Central Coast. And I will say that that caucus is brand new, but both myself, I'm the chair, and then our vice chair, Senator Monique Limon. So we have 2 women leaders for that caucus, and half of the caucus is women. And so I'm proud to say what that means is that the Central Coast has parity in terms of representation in the state legislature from Santa Cruz to Ventura. So we're incredibly proud of that. And we have been working collectively on a set of bill priorities as well as budget advocacy to make sure that funds are coming to the Central Coast and to protect the things that are most important to us. And today in the Assembly, and I'm sure Senator Laird will touch on this in the Senate side, but we voted on some of the budget bills and are really working hard to protect education, to protect funds for the most needy families, and to protect funds for coastal resilience, knowing how important that is to our communities coming out of last winter's storms. And one other thing that I want to mention, because this is the Democratic Women, is the focus on not just abortion protections in California, but helping our sisters and birthing people in other states that don't have access to reproductive care or to women's health care or to gender affirming care. And so, as you know, Arizona had passed a very, very archaic abortion ban. Much of that has been overturned, but right away, the California legislature, the Legislative Women's Caucus, and the governor of California came together to support our sisters in Arizona who may need to come into California and see their own doctors. And so we enacted urgency legislation, and I was there with the governor at that press conference as a member of the Select Committee on Reproductive Rights. And what we did was pass urgency legislation to allow abortion providers from Arizona to cross the border and practice in California should their patients need to come to California to get the care that they need. And so very proud of the work of the Legislative Women's Caucus, and of course, my colleague Assemblymember Pellerin, who's in that, and State Senator Laird, who is such a staunch ally for reproductive rights and women's health care. And so a lot going on. I'll just end by saying, with the budget, that's what you're going to hear most in the news about, but that really our focus has been protecting the gains that have been made in education, protecting our social services, And what our budget chair said in his comments today was, we do not want to balance California's budget on the backs of the poor. And I would say your Central Coast Caucus is absolutely behind that statement, as is the Women's Caucus, as are your representatives here this evening. So thank you so much for having me and letting me chime in from my car. And I cannot wait to see all of you in person. I'm going to be up in Aptos tomorrow to tour the Aptos library. Very excited about that and looking forward to seeing folks soon.
And thank you.
Yes, and now we're going to hear from Senator John Lair, who is the California State Senator for District 17 since December of 2020. Before that, he was Secretary of the California Natural Resources Agency and a former legislator who represented the 27th District in the Assembly. And he's been in public life. This is a debate, 35, 40, 45 years. This came up the other day. Don said 35 and people in the audience said 40. What do you think it is, 40, 45?
I served on the city council with Mike Rockman 43 years ago.
There
so
you go.
He's probably got an edge.
Okay, all right. Senator Laird's been around for 40-some years. So, John, we're going to let you take it away. I think you can talk about any of the legislation you wish, but I think you're going to focus on the budget. Is that correct?
I'm going to talk about it.
Okay, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much. And it's great to see you. And it's always zany when Dawn, I was waiting for her to say where she was.
Yeah.
You know, she pulled over in San Ardo to do that. And Gail and I raced back earlier today because we had a floor session this morning. And I think it's interesting. Ours went on for a while because in addition to the budget that I'll talk about in a second, there was this ballot measure, a ballot initiative that was collecting signatures that would have been really draconian on forcing teachers to out kids to their parents if they were aware of this, and it failed. They couldn't get enough signatures, and when they couldn't get enough signatures, spearheaded by the LGBT caucus, I was trying to count, given what Dawn said about the number of women. I think we're at the point that we've had 19. There's 12 LGBT caucus members right now, which is the largest in the nation. It is 10% of the legislature. And we're going to go up in this November's election. And we may well, for the first time in history, have the first majority of women in the state senate. Anyone out?
We just lost our Zoom. John, we just lost our Zoom, Mike. And
We're good.
And anyway, there's an off-mic discussion here for those of you at home. And so today, there was an assembly bill that was gutted and amended a couple of weeks ago to outlaw forced out. And it is sponsored by the caucus, and it came to the Senate floor today, and there was an hour debate. And an hour debate for it to get out on a completely partisan vote, 29-8. And it will go to the assembly now. And the governor has indicated that he's favorable to this. So we were waiting so that the bill would not feed the initiative in the signature collection for this to happen. So that was big today. And there was a really powerful speech by a new senator. I mean, she's in her second year now, from San Fernando, about when she came out to her parents. How her mother she got home and all her clothes and effects were in the front yard. And what that was like. And the argument was, let parents decide and make teachers tell the parents about anything they know about the kid. And I think the debate, I had a lot of fun. I leaned back and decided to rebut things. And so one senator said that this was about local control, just allow local school boards to do it. And I said, well, if you're African American in the Deep South in the 100 years after the Civil War. Let me tell you what local control meant. And even one of the Republican senators said that was a powerful point later in the debate. And we went through, and one person that was arguing against it said, well, this bill should be about a majority of kids. And when I spoke after the senator who had all her effects in the front yard, when she came out to parents, I said, if a minority of kids are like that, there shouldn't have to be a majority for us to protect them. So I think that bill's going to go all the way, but it's clear. I think as animated as our discussion was, it'll look like a picnic compared to some of the things that are about to happen in December. So Gail has some colleagues that are weird.
Yeah.
So that was just bringing to you what happened today. The other thing that happened today was we approved a legislative budget and sent it to the governor. And the process, for those of you that are uninitiated, and boy, it might recommend you if you are, is the governor releases a budget in the second week of January, and then we slice it and dice it. I chair the education budget subcommittee, and we had 10 hearings, and we went through every single part of it, whether it was Proposition 98, K through 14 funding, University of California, CSU system, community colleges, scholarships, all the expanded learning programs. We went through it all. And then when the governor released a budget in May, it's supposed to take that into account. It's supposed to take the tax revenues that come in after April 15th in account. And we started in January with there being a debate about whether the deficit was 38 billion on a $220 billion budget or 53 billion. And then the numbers went up. And so we approved today a balanced budget that restores some of the major cuts that you can get on the Assembly or Senate budget webpage. A more detailed list of the things that are there and what they did. We put back some of the climate resilience money, the money for housing for people making under $13,000 a year, immigrants in home support care, some of the general child care money. Lots went back. In education, which was what I was working on, in higher education, the governor in May proposed a $125 million cut to UC, not even considering an increase, a major cut, and to the California State University system, $75 million. And he gutted the middle class scholarship program. There was $600 million. He cut $500 million out. And that we, in recent years, have done 5% a year to UC and CSU. And we did some of the biggest additions to higher education scholarships in 2021 and 2022. And so this was going to be a real step back, right at the time that the federal government is delaying some of their scholarship information, and parents and students are making these decisions about where to go right now. And then 5/6 of the middle class scholarship program was cut by the governor. So we restored 100% the middle class scholarship all the way back, so that, and what is little understood, I sort of keep telling UC in particular that they don't do a good job of explaining their own scholarship system, but there's Cal Grant programs for people of really lower and lower middle incomes that they qualify for. And then there's a middle class scholarship for parents that are up to, I mean, the combined income is 150, 170,000, and they get partial scholarships. So that it is really only the families that are at the top of the income scale that don't get some scholarship offset to go to UC. And whenever UC considers a tuition increase, everybody freaks out because they think it applies to everybody. And it doesn't, because of the level of scholarships. And UC last year adopted a whole new tuition program that whatever the tuition is, when you're a start and are accepted at the first year to go into UC, it's locked in for the life of your time at UC. It doesn't change. So parents can plan. And then if they raise it for the next year a little bit, it locks in for that class. And the president of UC, Michael Drake, did this, who was in Santa Cruz last weekend, did this at Ohio State and felt before he came to the University of California and thought it really worked. So this year's budget is pretty amazing. And given where it was and given the challenges, there's still some really gruesome cuts in there, but not at the level that was proposed as late as May 15th. And now though, that's what the Assembly and the Senate want to do. We passed exactly the same budget today and sent it to the governor, but there's still negotiations going. And it's my take that the governor is moving our way on a significant number of the things, although we won't know. We met our deadline. We have to have a budget in print as late as June 27th if there are changes to be made. But there's a chance that the agreement will come in the next few days, and then we will adopt the entire budget, and that will be done. And if it is a three-party negotiated agreement, we will essentially sign the budget that we sent. So that's just the center of everything right now. And and then there's an ancillary part that I know some of you will ask in the question and answer period, so I will just get to it. And that is we are considering two bond measures. And we have till June 27th to agree to put them on the ballot for the November election. And there were really three candidates. It was a climate bond, which would have fire prevention, water supply and water issues, land conservation to deal with the governor's 30 by 30, some of the ocean conservation, just it would be a climate bond. And second would be a school construction bond. And the last bond that was passed, the monies ran out in 2020 or 2021 for any new or repair school projects that the state might fund. And we were funding a year at a time for school projects. It's out now. If we don't have a school bond, school construction money in California runs out. And there is a debate going on between the houses because it would be a K through 14 bond or a K through 14 bond plus UC and CSU. I personally advocate plus UC and CSU. That's a stumbling block right now, but we hope that it will be resolved. And the third bond that was really being considered, and I don't think it's going to make it because we have a limited capacity of money, is for housing. Because the affordable housing piece, we're depending on things like density bonuses and other things. When I was instrumental in an affordable housing bond in 2006 when I was budget chair in the Assembly, and it really made the difference for locals to be able to have that piece of money that would make a budget pencil out for an affordable housing project. We need to do that. There just wasn't enough capacity this year to get there. And then, as Gail mentioned and Dawn mentioned, we each have a set of bills, and this is a unique year because in my first 3 years back in the legislature and the Senate, I've had 49 bills signed into law, and there were big bills on certain issues, on pain and suffering benefits for people with California was one of 5 states that if you had pain and suffering action against somebody who died, that action died with you. We were one of 5 states. I got to give a speech that you love to give, where I said, let's catch up with Alabama. We can do it. Come on, and that bill got signed into law. And so a whole host of bills this year we really had to craft our package around what didn't have money in it. So I'm doing a bill on solar and mobile homes because certain mobile home parks prohibit individuals, if they have individual meters, from having solar. That shouldn't happen. It's part of our conversion. If you go down to the beach here, Natural Bridges is a place I reported the PSA. Disposable propane canisters just litter the area and the trash cans, and I have a bill that would in 3 years or 4 years phase in refillable canisters, so that is the issue right now. And I have these big billboards. There's a lobbyist that's represents one of the propane canister companies that's, in my view, been really obnoxious. And he would stand outside the Capitol and leaflet every senator going in for 6 weeks. He did that just on my bill. So we got 3 huge billboards of trucks having to cart away disposed canisters in Yosemite and other places, and stood outside the Capitol with them. And it sort of flipped the debate. I got it out of the Senate 32-7 with Republicans even voting for it. And now it's on to the Assembly, and it's something we ought to do. We're engaging with the governor to see what he will sign. And if any of you, 14 years ago, the legislature, and I was in it when it was first done, allowed you to cash in up to $9 of an unused gift certificate if it turns out you have money left or other things. Well, inflation has gone 50% roughly since then. So I have a bill to lift it and put an inflationary factor in, and I've sort of flipped out the retailers, and it is coming to an assembly committee near you. And but I got it out overwhelmingly in the Senate, and we might have to change the amount or deal with the inflationary part of it, but I'm positioned well. And then if you look at the highway names out here, when any highway gets named, 82% of them in California are named from them. And so there have been a number of women that have tried to crack this, and I have a couple of colleagues that no longer vote for naming a highway after a man. And I have talked to them and I said, couldn't we just address this rather than you having to do that? So I have a bill that sets up a fund to name highways in a more diverse way. And it sets up the fund. There's a way that it will work. We had to do it so that we weren't appropriating money this year to get it in place. I've gotten it out of the Senate and over to the Assembly. And I also have a bill, I think I have 17 or 18 or 19 that have moved over to the Assembly. I'm moving a lot of bills, and one of them was inspired by the Big Basin Water Company. And the Big Basin Water Company, with all its problems, doesn't even know in some cases who some of their customers are, that they are not together. So I have a bill that really sets up minimum administrative standards for small water companies, so that because the state has had to step in with $800,000 or $900,000 because of what's going on up there, and the people up there have unreliable water, are stressed. It's been a horrible thing, and so I'm doing that. So I'll just stop there. But one last thing, I do have a bill that is a Central Coast Caucus priority bill, and in 2021, the San Luis Obispo County Board of Supervisors did one of the most egregious gerrymanders in a county in modern times. San Luis Obispo County, I represent all of it right now, is trending Democratic. And for the first time, I think 2 years ago, there's a plurality of Democrats in San Luis Obispo County. So the 3-2 Republican majority on the board tried to jam as many Democrats as possible into one district and then make the other 4 competitive for Republicans. And they thought they were doing it in a way that they were going to preserve the majority. And there's this one supervisor, Bruce Gibson, is now president of CSAC, the County Supervisors Association, who has historically been the coastal guy. He goes from the Monterey County line through San Simeon and Cambria, Yukos, Morro Bay. He's had a little of San Luis Obispo. He's a land conservationist, he worked on the Hearst Castle, conservation easement process. And they redrew his district to give him a Republican plurality by 2,500 voters. And he only had 33% of the district that he had before the lines. And he took this coastal person and they gave him San Miguel, Atascadero, all these places that were inland. And he testified, my bill got out of Gail's committee earlier this week, and he came up and testified, and he said there are certain people that will not vote for supervisor for 8 years, and there are certain people that will vote for supervisor 3 times in 4 years. And so I have a bill to establish an independent redistricting commission for San Luis Obispo County. Got out of Gail's committee, and I'm determined that we're going to get there. I'll stop and I'll look forward to any questions.
Great. Actually, thank you, Senator Laird. We're actually going to do questions after our next speaker.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting
You
that.
just stay
I'm-
right there.
I-
You
if
stay
my-
right
My
there.
bills are going to the assembly. I'm not cutting Gail off.
There you go.
And now, I was just gonna briefly introduce Assemblymember Gail Pellerin, who represents the 28th district. Much like Assemblymember Addis, you are a trailblazer, being our beloved Santa Cruz County Elections Officer for 27 years. So thank you for running and getting elected to the state legislature in 2022. Take it away.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here on a Thursday night. Thank you to Peggy and Angela and Mike, and thanks for doing all the tech work, and thank you all for voting me in. I definitely could not have done this without all of you, and I am the first woman from Santa Cruz County to be elected to an office higher than countywide. So we broke that glass ceiling, and I think we need to just keep on going. And just kind of speaking a little bit about the women's issues, you know, we, like, Assemblymember Addis says, we have a women's caucus. Out of the 120 members of the state legislature, 50 of us are women in this bipartisan, bicameral women's legislative caucus. We have a number of priority bills. I could leave this behind if you guys want to see those, that are based on different pillars of priorities that we have, everything including addressing poverty, childcare, gender violence, healthcare, vulnerable communities, and workplace and economic equity. So it's a really very powerful caucus, and we're growing in numbers. And as our senator said, it looks like we might have a majority of women in the state Senate next year. And I suspect we will get to parity and beyond in the years afterwards. So women are taking over. And it was great having Senator Laird, and I'm the chair of the elections committee in the assembly. And he got a little taste of what I get to deal with every committee from a certain legislator from Riverside, who I will not name, but just sort of a bit of a pain. And challenged Senator Laird a lot on his bill on the San Luis Obispo redistricting, and he handled him very well. We also had a bill that was up in the Assembly Elections Committee by Dave Min, Senator Min, that Huntington Beach is a charter city that adopted a local ordinance to require ID to vote at their polling places. This is a clear violation of state law, and Senator Min is carrying the bill to unwind that and say that that cannot happen, and it was challenged in court, and he got an earful as well from this assembly member. And then we had Assemblymember Newman, who was wanting to work with the Orange County Board of Education to move their elections from the primary to the general and increase their membership from 5 to 7, which is very much in line with other boards of education and other counties of that size, like Santa Clara County has a 7-person board of education. And he was challenged a lot, and was even hostile amendments were offered in the committee from this member to Senator Newman's bill, and we shut that down. But it's never dull in assembly elections these days. And that is one reason why I ran for this office, is my passion for democracy. And make no mistake, our future of our democracy is on the ballot this November. And while we do have this federal race that is very, very concerning, there's a lot going on in California as well. And, you know, last year I did 10 bills and that I sent to the governor, and all 10 of those were signed. And one of them early on that I introduced, I was on the phone talking to my colleague in Shasta County, it's Shasta County Registrar. And she was telling me about her Rowe County Board of Supervisors that threw out their voting system and said you have to turn to hand counted paper ballots. And she and I were talking, and it's just like, that's insane. You know, we got to do something about this. I said, yeah, we got to do something about this. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm a legislator. I could do something about this. So I drafted a bill, and the first draft got revised a few times, but I was successful in getting that bill to the governor, signed into law. So every county in the state of California must use a federally qualified, state certified voting system that adheres to voting system standards, that's accessible, that's secure, that's transparent, that's auditable, and accurate. So we were very successful in doing that because there were other counties in the northern region that were wanting to go this direction. So one point for democracy down. And I'm continuing in that journey here this year. One of the big bills I'm hearing this year is a bill to ban digitally created materially deceptive materials in the election 120 days before the election and a number of days after the election, because we do not want to have a situation where people are seeing, hearing things that are not true and not factual, because people want to create chaos in elections, and this is one tool that is so easily accessible. And they could take John Laird's image, his voice, his mannerisms, and recreate it, having him say something that he has never said just to cause havoc in an election. So we're going to try to shut that down. And I'm working with with CITED, which is the Center for Information Technology and Democracy. I think, but a great group of experts in this field, lawyers and tech folks. And we've got a 3-bill package that we're moving through the legislature. So that bill is moving along, and I'm very excited about that. And other committees I'm on business and professions, I'm on natural resources. And so this lobbyist person that he was talking about hit me up this morning when I was walking into the building with the whole handout on his propane cylinder bill. So I just was asking a little bit about that, and he filled me in, and you got my vote for that. And then I also sit on the appropriations committee. And then another thing I did when another reason I was very motivated to run for state office is that we are in a mental health crisis, and mental health has profoundly impacted my family. And one of the first things I did when I came to the state legislature was to ask for a select committee on California's mental health crisis. So one was created, and I'm the vice chair of that committee. My colleague, Assembly Member Dr. Corey Jackson, is the chair of that committee. And we've held a number of hearings, and I held one actually in the district in December in Los Gatos. And we're working a lot in the mental health space in our office. I've got Lizette Jones here, my field rep here in Santa Cruz, so thank you for being here. And we'll be doing a care fair in September, I think, and bringing a bunch of vendors and people together and really highlighting mental health and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves and our families. And I also I'm a member of I actually straddle caucuses. I'm in a Central Coast caucus, which I love, and another one of our Santa Cruz County representatives, Speaker Robert Rivas, is in that caucus as well. And I'm in the Bay Area caucus, and Senator Laird's in that caucus now, but I think you're getting picked out.
Until
Yes, then you're out. And I've also joined the Jewish caucus, the Armenian caucus. We just started a disability caucus, and I'm really excited about that one. And I'm the co-chair of the UC Roundtable, where we meet regularly with UC President Drake, and we talk about issues impacting the universities. And I'm also I don't know what my title is, but I'm like an associate member of the State Park and Recreation Commission. And that is like one of my favorite things to do, because it's like getting out of school for the day and getting to go hang out in parks and talk to people about the importance of our parks. And just this week, we're in State Parks Week. This week, we opened our first state park in 10 years. It's been 10 years since we've opened a new state park. And Dos Rios just opened this week, and it's a phenomenal park over in Stanislaus, Tuolumne area there, Tuolumne River, I mean. And I didn't get to go because I was here in session, but I hope to visit that park very, very soon. And on the park side of things, I am carrying a bill for Semper Virens that is going to allow them to transfer properties that they've acquired. So it streamlines the process of transferring that property into state park stewardship and care. And so that bill, I tried last year and it failed because one of the chairs of a committee wanted to amend it to apply statewide. And when you do that, the price tag goes boom and the bill blew up. So this year I kept it district only, and I didn't want to do that last year, but they weren't going to give it a hearing, so I thought, okay. But this year now it's district only, and I got it out of the state assembly, and it's going over to the Senate. So I'm hoping Senator Laird there will help me with that one. And other bills I'm carrying in the election space, we had a situation where a state assembly member was running for state assembly, and then Kevin McCarthy withdrew, dropped out or quit his job and left a vacancy in Congress, and he decided to run for Congress, but there's no way to withdraw your candidacy in a primary. So this assembly member appeared on the ballot twice in March, both for Congress and state assembly. And right now he is in a run. He actually ran for a special election for Congress as well, and has been elected to that and is now serving in Congress. And yet he is still on the ballot in his district in November running for state assembly. So it's just chaotic. So I have a bill to clean that up, and I'm working very closely with the Secretary of State's office so that situation will never happen again. And then I also have a bill on document retention for election materials. I have a committee omnibus bill as well. One of the bills that I love, they always say don't fall in love with your bills, but I do. And I had a bill on civic education for high schools, and it was going to be a kind of a no-brainer too. It was like, when funding's available, the Secretary of State shall issue grants to county elections officials to do civic engagement in the high schools. And it just didn't make it out of appropriation. So, but I'm here for the long haul, so I'll be back, as they say, and carry that one again. And another bill I'm carrying, Senator Laird is a co-author, and we just got that out of a Senate committee the other day, is a bill that will label gas stoves and advise consumers. It doesn't ban gas stoves, but it will label them to advise consumers that they do emit toxic gases that when used indoors actually exceed the EPA standards for outdoors. So when you're using a gas stove, you gotta be ventilating. You gotta have that hood vent going. Now, I learned something in the course of this bill. I'm gonna be 62 later this month. And here I learned something. I've always used my vent when I'm using my stove. I have never used it when I use the oven. And guess what? The same gases are coming out when you're using the oven. So I'm now using that hood vent, and I've learned that through carrying this bill, which I'm working on with CalPERG. And I've been able to get that bill through, and we're hoping that that one gets to the governor as well. And I have another bill I'm working on that's a cannabis direct-to-consumer bill that will allow our small and equity cultivators to apply for a Department of Cannabis Control license that will allow them to sell their products at a state licensed, locally approved temporary cannabis event. So think about, like, you go to a beer festival and you get to drink beers and try different beers, or a wine festival. This will be something for cannabis and for our small and equity growers to be able to showcase their product to people, and there's small quantities that they can purchase. And so it would be a great thing to help our small growers remain solvent and continue doing the great work that they're doing. And another bill that I'm carrying was a horrific situation that happened over in Santa Clara County. So my district is the harbor north of the county line. Then I go over the summit into Santa Clara County down to Morgan Hill. And we had a tragic incident where 3 children in a daycare center ended up in a pool, and 2 of them died. it was horrific. I'm driving in the car. I'm always in the car. I'm driving the car, listening to KCBS. I hear this story. I'm sobbing in tears. And I call my legislative director. And I said, we got to do something. We got to make this never happen again. So I have a bill that says that you have to have a backup system of security and protection if you have a swimming pool in a daycare or any kind of group living facility. So there was a loophole in the law that allowed them to have a pool at their daycare center with just a fence, and the fence was open. Kids walked in, 2 of them died. So we're going to name the bill in the honor of the 2 kids. I think it was a 12-month-old and an 18-month-old. So it was just really a very horrific event, but taking something tragic and turning it into something good. So that's a bill I care a lot about. And I'm also doing a bill on farm worker housing that expands upon a bill that Robert Rivas had carried that allowed farm worker housing to be built on agriculture lands. But it wasn't workable because there wasn't availability and there wasn't water and sewage hookups. So we're expanding this bill to allow these to be built in city and county owned lands to build farm worker housing up to 150 units. So, an attempt to deal with the housing crisis. And of course, Senator Laird mentioned the highway naming bills and the fact that so many of them are being named after men. And I am a woman legislator carrying a resolution to name a highway after Damon Gutzweiler. So that bill did get through the Senate committees. It's going to the Senate floor. And you all know the story about Damon who died in the San Lorenzo Valley. So that resolution is going to be heard, and there'll be an unveiling ceremony of that plan for the fall. And where am I on time? Wrap it up. Okay. And I guess the other things I just want to say is that other resolutions and issues I'm working on are human trafficking. I did a resolution for that in January. I'm working closely with a senator on some human trafficking legislation. I'm actually going to get to go. You're going to be very excited. I get to go observe a sting operation next week. And it's going to be interesting. And also come September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And I'll be doing a resolution around that. And we're continuing to try to do outreach activities in our community. We do positive policy, we do community conversations, we do taking care of business, we do hike a trail with Gail. So we have lots of different events that we do to connect with our constituents, which I love to do. So with that, I will wrap it up.
We have time for questions. Mike P, you'll let me know if you've got questions online and read them. Questions? Anybody here? How is something going?
Mike,
Yeah. Yes. That was the hand up and down. Okay. Yes. Short question.
Yeah.
No, the answer.
This is about a piece of legislation that doesn't exist, and I'm wondering your thoughts about it. I don't know the exact formula, and I'm sure both of you do. There's something about it. In Santa Cruz County, because of some formula about how counties get funded, receives less than a lot of other counties because we've been designated a rural county. And it has to do something about the fact that so many people don't live in cities in Santa Cruz County. But I'm not so interested in the question of what's wrong, but is it possible that we can possibly adjust that? We are an urban county and we need more money, and I wonder whether there's any prospect for like changing that situation.
I'll explain to you the issue and what you were asking about right after I said that I wasn't being totally rude by texting during Gail's talk. We tote every time somebody commits on a bill. So I texted to my left director, she's going to vote for my book. Here's the situation, and it's being discussed at the Board of Supervisors. It's not sort of a formula from outside. It's how the formula for money that's within Santa Cruz County is spent. And it was done a while ago, and it was done, and it's in the unincorporated area primarily. But in any event, in county jurisdiction, I believe the number is 13% of the property taxes go to the county. 57% go to schools, more goes to fire and other local districts. And so this is a zero-sum game. So if you were to raise the money that goes to the county, you would cut schools or cut fire or cut other things. And I had a conversation with one of the supervisors who I'm sure you can guess, who said, this needs to go up. We're being ripped off. And I said, well, tell me which fire districts you cut or which school districts you cut. And that supervisor said something like, that's why you make the big bucks. And it was like, it's not gonna work that way. Because the Board of Supervisors actually has the fire budget for much of rural Santa Cruz County. And I think to readjust it, there has to be work on how it will be redone with everybody that benefits from that fund. But I mean, does this supervisor really want to go to the Live Oak School District and say, are you willing to take a further cut so you can fund my pledge to get more money for the county? That's the nature of the discussion that we'll have to have. And I haven't been asked directly, except in a private meeting by that supervisor, but I would suggest that the hard work of looking at the entire formula and everybody that benefits from it be assessed to see if there is a price to go. And normally, you only fix formulas like that when you can add money to it, and everybody else is sort of held harmless, and then the one that has the low percentage goes up, and that's not the case per se. So that's the situation. And frankly, it gets talked about what the low percentage is, and everybody gets worked up without telling them the second that it's a zero-sum game, and you would have to cut emergency services like schools and other things.
I had assumed. I had assumed that it was, we're getting a smaller share than other counties, but that's.
That's not
It's within
necessarily.
the county.
What it is that counties get a certain share of property tax back based on, as I understand it, generally how much they contribute. It's not direct, but it's sort of proportional. And then it's what the split is within.
You have another question, Brad?
Yep, my question is about education, and I thank you for working on a civic education bill. My question is about financial literacy, but bills that have been attempted but failed here, and I think 23 states have a standard and a required curriculum, and California is not one of them yet. Is that something that's on the drawing
Yeah.
board?
Kevin McCarty, has a bill. I think I'm a co-author of it. And, yes, I think that's definitely something that we should be doing.
Is that coming back?
I think it's going through the legislature now. I feel like I heard him, he presented it on the assembly floor, and I think it's over in the Senate. Yeah.
Good.
And also, speaking of civic education, one bill I forgot to say is my AB 1850, which will declare the banana slug the state slug. And it has created a lot of civic engagement with kids and youth. We did an art contest, and one classroom did a whole study of the banana slug. And these kinds of bills in a tough budget year are really, fun to do. And Senator Laird is my forge on me. He's gonna get it to the governor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
No, can I add?
Yes.
Can I add? Because I don't have a list here, but I believe an initiative is qualified for the November ballot on financial literacy.
Was that?
And yet I don't know. That will be returning to a future DWC meeting on all the propositions.
I just want to check in with Michael Haynes. Do we have questions coming from online? Okay, do you want to take those? Read those? Oh, would you like a microphone?
So there is something called the California Required Personal Finance Course for High School Graduation Initiative. It has qualified for the 2024 ballot. So
Okay. And
it's
then
okay. The question,
yeah, there is a bill. The McCarty bill. Oh, it died. It died.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But there's the initiative. What's the question?
the question is from Sarah Smith online. How can we reverse the city's inability to stop the high-rise mess that is taking over and make a new law to give power back to cities?
No, I noticed. It was like Serpico, everybody was stepping back. I think first, the law in question was I want to do this in 3 ways. The law in question was done before Gail and I were there. And the piece of that is, as Gail said, we are in the Bay Area caucus. And we went to a Bay Area caucus retreat in Marin a couple of months ago. And I was stunned to realize that there were just a couple of us that weren't enthusiastic about overruling every single local authority that existed. And the politics statewide of this have changed. Because if we really have a $3 million deficit of housing units, that's causing the scarcity and the prices to go up and contributes to the unsheltered. It's going to take these dramatic things to reverse it. And so there is an emerging political majority that wants to override local land use. And it seems to me that this tower is one of the most egregious cases of that coming. I've been waiting to hear from my friends that are in the condo complex right behind it that are going to not be able to see the town clock and have the sunset early in the day because of where they're situated. And I've been talking to people about it. We're, as we've been talking about, 2/3 of the way through the legislative session. And it's to the point that the die is cast for what bills are here. And we're watching as cities and counties are having their housing elements improved. We're watching as certain people are meeting their goals of the housing that is constructed. And it seems to me that we have to start talking about if somebody is meeting the housing goals, they're meeting the housing goals, that they ought to be able to, if they continue to meet the housing goals, resume some of the local hours that were taken away to make sure that they produce housing. That's easier said than done for any of a number of reasons, because people will be skeptical that housing is still going to continue to be built, and you have to decide how you do that. It's like you did for 1 year. People make the housing for 1 year, they get the authority restored, and then they go back to not providing housing as to the plan. So you have to have some kind of way that you do that in its teeth. But I'm thinking that that there has to start to be a conversation. Because the reason, and I watched legislature, you know, I don't know if I was still secretary or I was running when one of the major ones was being passed. And it was a Nancy Skinner bill, and it overrode things. And the city of Morgan Hill, which for now we both represent, had voter approved growth management. And for reasons that are counterintuitive, they were building more affordable housing because of the way it was structured. And so what happened is they were overridden, and they're building slightly more, a number of more housing units, slightly in Morgan Hill, but much less that are affordable. And this was done to force them to build housing. And yet, because I worked with the author at the time, even though I wasn't in the legislature, to try to get an amendment to allow for situations like that. So it wasn't one size fits all. I think at the time the governor saw it all slipping away if you allowed any amendments, and he was forcibly sticking to it without amending. And so I think that's the conversation that has to start there.
And yeah, I agree with that as well. And you know, the thing with these density bonus laws too, there was a bill to propose the density bonus in the coastal zone. And I stood up on the assembly floor and argued against that, saying that we do not want, we want to make, our coastal zone is 1% of the land in California. And it is the most vulnerable land, and as we know, it's falling in the ocean in places. And we don't want to turn our West Cliff Drive into a Miami-looking environment. So I made a pitch for that along with some of my other colleagues, and the bill still got out of the state assembly before. So it's over in the Senate now. And I do believe this project that's being proposed, it's just a proposal right now. And I think it's shocking to hear that size of a building going in. I know there's alternative plans to this to do something more reasonable and fewer floors. So I certainly hope all of you, and including myself, I've asked for a meeting with the developer to talk to them about this project. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to have those communications with the developer.
Could you tell me just what the name of this bill is that we're, is there one bill or are there a bunch of bills?
Oh,
There's a bunch of bills.
yeah, lots of
There's a
bills.
bunch of bills. SB 330 was one of them.
Right.
That's not the one I think necessarily needs to fix. That was the one. And it was SB 330 of 2019 or some prior.
There's like 15 bills.
There's a lot.
Yeah, and one added point, the bill that Gail referred to is authored by San Diego Assembly Member Alvarez. And it's coming to the Natural Resources Committee, on which I sit. And there were 3 similar bills coming out of the Senate. And we, in that committee, changed both. Scott Wiener wanted to do a bill that by legislation changed what part of San Francisco was in the coastal zone. And the minute we start legislating coastal zone, there is no coastal zone. That I had people in Pismo Beach that were mad about seawalls that started texting me and saying, "Get us in the Wiener bill." And so we removed that in the Natural Resources Committee. And I have some hopes that we will deal with this bill that came out of the Assembly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, well, we do. And anything else, Mike, Pete? Do we have anybody else online? Oh, okay. Question here.
Hello, thank you so much for all of your arduous hard work, and I appreciate you mentioning that you're working on that farm working, housing on agricultural land and to be able to come city and county land. I wanted to just lift up that our small but mighty Bajaro community of Bajaro and Las Lomas, right in between Santa Cruz County, South Santa Cruz County, and North Monterey County, that sliver that has been just really impacted and completely disenfranchised. It was currently on the Monterey County Board of Supervisors agenda, and once again, Bajaro was overlooked for housing, and so overcrowding there continues to be something that many of the families that we serve surface up, and that it is so needed. And so if there's anything that you all could do to just keep voicing for our families in Bajaro, it's really
I'm the one of the 2 of us that has Pajaro in my district, so we should probably talk about that. And that particular project has been really controversial for a lot of different reasons. And I think that there obviously needs to be more housing. And the real problem is that there's not enough land, not in the right place, and with not enough of the incentives there to make it as affordable as it needs to be made. And so we just have to work on those projects. And I have a Monterey staff member, Gail and I both know that if you have a really good staff member, you hate to lose them. But I'm losing mine for a good reason. She won a blowout election to the Monterey Board of Supervisors in March. And she sits on the planning commission now. And she's been talking to me because she's been sitting on the popular housing projects. And I think Glenn Church is a supervisor who sees that as well, who actually represents the district. And they're talking about working together to see how they can.
Thank you. Any, what? Thank you.
Just one more question. I know you mentioned one of your favorite commissions or advisory committees you're a part of is for Parks and Rec. I just wanted to lift up as a mama of a 9-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. I see so many parks just throughout either our county or other neighboring counties that have their play structures just out in the sun. So no overhead cover numbers. And I wonder if that is something that, especially as global warming is continuing to happen, where we're having hotter and hotter, longer, bouts of that sun, really just burning our kiddos, and, those accidents could be like really serious, or families just avoid using those play structures altogether. So I wonder if that might be something also to have on the radar, to just get our kiddos some shade. Thank you.
No, definitely. And extreme heat and climate change is real, and not only in parks, but in schools, and especially that blacktop that's there when it heats up, and Morgan Hill gets to be over 100, Scotts Valley is over 100. It's it's really dangerous for our kids. So definitely on our radar, and state parks in itself. And there's just so much deferred maintenance that they have, and this budget, they did not do well. That, like the library park pass, that's gonna go away. It's a 3-year pilot project, and there's no funding to continue it. But I'm gonna continue to fight for these issues, because I think, also from a mental health standpoint, it is so important to get out there and get in the redwoods and have the sun in your face, and really helps with our mental health.
And there has been a program under the Strategic Growth Council for Sustainable Communities, because particularly with play structures at schools, there's urban areas that literally in the entire school campus don't have green space. And if you're in Los Angeles or some other places, it's horrible heat islands. So there have been grants to try to green some of the schools and the parks to deal with that. And I don't know how that's fair and totally this year's budget, but that's out there too.
We're gonna have time for one more question. Mike's got one mic.
This is just a personal question. So I'm looking just at Ballotpedia, and I've seen 14 different ballot measures that have qualified for November. And my question is about the ones that deal with tax thresholds at the local level. So we have some dueling ballot measures where some are saying, hey, we're going to lower special taxes to, I believe it's 55, or maybe even just 50+1. And then there's another dueling measure that's like, no, we need to keep it at the supermajority. And then there's another that says, if you're going to raise a tax threshold to a supermajority, you yourself need to have a supermajority. And it's just like this big mess. So I'm just
Well, one of those is getting changed. So the one that Cecilia Aguiar Curry did, that was gonna raise the threshold for taxes and bonds from 2/3 to 55%, is getting amended to be just applying to bonds, and the tax piece is gonna come out. So I do believe that those 3 competing measures will be on the ballot in November. Plus, another one that I'm really super excited about is to remove the hateful Prop 8 language we have in the Constitution about same-sex marriage. So that one's gonna come out.
Let me add to what Gail said about the ones that you asked about. It's funny because I was speaking to the San Luis Obispo Chamber of Commerce, and I get a question on this where they said, well, there's 2 ballot measures on it. One's anti-tax and one's pro-tax. And it's like, wait a second. I don't agree with the construction of the question. The difference is whether a tax requires 2/3 or now bonds or other things require 55%. That's the fundamental difference. And the one that requires the 2/3 is so draconian that there's things that if you're building a senior center and 98% of the money is funded, but 2% comes from something, you have to go to the ballot for the thing and get 2/3. It's just, it really sort of tries to lock up everything on 2/3 and lock up every piece that they can get. This is one of those, like the legendary tax ballot maker that should not be named, that just is sneaking up on us, and people should be paying attention. This is not good. And it's not just that. I think there's a provision in it that makes it retroactive to 2022. And so I was looking as somebody to give $10,000 along with Robert Rivas to the Watsonville Hospital bond measure. Fortunately, that required 2/3, that got 68.5. If this retroactively gets approved, it won't undo that. if that was a measure that required 55% or 50%, and this measure passes and it didn't get 2/3, it would undo that election because it goes back the cycle. So I'll be talking about this when we go over the proposition. Don't be fooled, but that one is horrible. And one of the reasons the legislature put the other one on the ballot is to call the attention. And we've been trying to get some of them to 55% for 20 years. The schools, the Cabrillo measure that I worked so hard on in 1998, that was the last cycle that required 2/3 for schools. Cabrillo got 74% that year, but after that went 55% for schools. And we wanted 55% for transportation and 55% for housing. And that's the thing that will be at least partially affected by the one that Gail mentioned is still on the ballot. So stay tuned.
Well, I'm gonna have the last question. Before we thank John and Gail for coming tonight, did everybody feel this was worthwhile and interesting?
Yeah.
Did you find it so interesting that I can have at least 5 people who are willing to stay and help me put the room back?
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Now we can thank Senator Laird and so for coming. Pass.